allocating a total of $162 million over 5 years to the effort, including repairing local economies under agreements signed with local tribes and landowners, along with state agencies and conservation partners. Assistant Secretary for Fish and Wildlife and Parks Shannon Estenos traveled to Arizona and Tennessee this week, where the Land and Water Conservation Fund's Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program is helping expand and rehabilitate urban parks in Tucson and Memphis. These investments will increase access to the outdoors, create safer spaces, enhance the visitor experience, improve accessibility, and boost climate resilience. The Provo River Delta Restoration Project is now complete. The nearly 260-acre project, supported by a $10 million investment through the bipartisan infrastructure law, is located a half-mile north of Utah Lake State Park. The restored delta provides an improved ecosystem for threatened June suckers, and the project expands recreational opportunities with trails, trailhead parking areas, non-motorized boat launches, fishing platforms, and a wildlife viewing observation tower. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management this week completed the 6th offshore wind lease sale of the Biden-Harris administration and the first in the Gulf of Maine. This also marked the first commercial sale for floating offshore wind on the Atlantic coast, and yet another significant milestone in the Biden-Harris administration's work to meet the president's goal of deploying 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy capacity by 2030 and 15 gigawatts of floating offshore wind energy by 2035. The U.S. Geological Survey this week awarded $4.8 million to 36 state geological surveys to preserve vital geologic and geophysical data and samples. Funding for the agency's National Geological and Geophysical Data Preservation Program from the bipartisan infrastructure law will expand capacity to safeguard physical samples like drill cores and geochemical samples, along with earth science assets, all of which are crucial to future scientific discovery, critical mineral characterization, climate resilience, and more. And our social media picture of the week, some say it's haunted by spirits of the past, but there's no denying that the Great Dismal Swamp National Wildlife Refuge contains some of the most important wildlife habitat in the Mid-Atlantic region. Its almost 113,000 acres, straddling Virginia and North Carolina, are also a haven for history, as the Great Dismal Swamp served as an invaluable hiding place for enslaved African Americans escaping to freedom before and during the Civil War. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That's This Week at Interior. This Week at Interior. Secretary Haaland joined President Biden at the Gila River Indian Community in Arizona this week on the president's first trip to Indian country. During their visit, the president issued an historic apology for the federal Indian boarding school era, spurred in part by the groundbreaking work conducted by the department over the past 3 years through the secretary's federal Indian boarding school initiative. A government acknowledgement and apology for the trauma inflicted by these schools and related policies was the top recommendation of the department's investigative report.
For decades, this terrible chapter was hidden from our history books. But now our administration's work will ensure that no one will ever forget.
After 150 years, the United States government eventually stopped the program. But the federal government has never formally apologized for what happened until today. I formally apologize as President of the United States of America for what we did. I formally apologize.
Acting Deputy Secretary Laura Daniel Davis and Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals Management Dr. Steve Felgus joined the Bureau of Land Management in Reno this week to announce the approval of the Rhyolite Ridge Lithium Mine project, a major step toward the Biden-Harris administration's efforts to strengthen domestic critical mineral supply chains. The project, located in southern Nevada's Silver Peak Range, could supply enough lithium to power nearly 370,000 electric vehicles annually. Acting Deputy Secretary Daniel Davis also visited Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge this week, where she announced more than $6.5 million in funding from President Biden's Investing in America agenda to support wildland fire management in Colorado. It'll help reduce risk from wildfires, support improved wildland firefighter training, expand efforts to rehabilitate burned areas in collaboration with partners, and advance wildfire science. Interior this week announced $9 million in funding through the President's Investing in America agenda for groundwater recharge, storage, and recovery, and a water rights transition program in Kansas. Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science Michael Brain made the announcement at the Kansas Equus-Beds Aquifer Recharge Storage and Recovery Project near Wichita, which will receive $7 million. The Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement this week awarded more than $244 million to address dangerous and polluting abandoned mine lands, create good-paying, family-sustaining jobs, and catalyze economic opportunity in coal communities across Pennsylvania. It's the largest annual state allocation under the Abandoned Mine Land Program and part of a once-in-a-generation investment of $11.3 billion through the bipartisan infrastructure law. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has announced it's downlisting the red cockaded woodpecker from endangered to threatened status under the Endangered Species Act. This milestone is the result of 5 decades of collaborative conservation efforts between Interior, federal, and state partners, tribes, the private sector, and private landowners that have resulted in increasing populations of these remarkable birds throughout their range. National Park Service Director Chuck Sams joined a celebration in Virginia's Colonial National Historical Park this week, marking the completion of a $24 million shoreline restoration project supported by the Great American Outdoors Act Legacy Restoration Fund. Tides, storms, and sea level rise had altered a 3-mile stretch of the York River shoreline, resulting in severe erosion and shoreline loss that threatened archaeological sites and the stability of a section of the Colonial Parkway. Sad news from Snake River Canyon, Wyoming this week, where a well-known grizzly bear in the greater Yellowstone area was struck and killed by a vehicle. Bear 399, as she was known, was 28 years old and the oldest known reproducing bear in the local ecosystem. She had fans and followers from around the world. And our social media picture of the week, this stunning image of the Aravaipa Canyon Wilderness in Arizona. Visitors can find towering cliffs, flowing waters, and a rich diversity of plants and wildlife, making it a unique destination for adventurers seeking solitude and stunning scenery. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. That's This Week at Interior.
Hello, I'm BLM Colorado State Director Doug Vilsack here at Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, and
You're watching This Week at Interior.
This Week at Interior. Secretary Haaland was in New Mexico and Colorado this week to highlight how President Biden's Investing in America agenda is restoring public lands and waters, strengthening Indian country and the use of indigenous knowledge, and building a next-generation conservation workforce through the Indian Youth Service Corps, part of the president's new American Climate Corps. In New Mexico's Acoma Pueblo, she highlighted a $480,000 grant to advance the Ancestral Lands Conservation Corps, or ALCC's, food sovereignty and historic preservation projects in collaboration with its partners. Later, the secretary traveled to Canyons of the Ancients National Monument in Colorado to meet with their ALCC trail crew. The monument, managed by the Bureau of Land Management, contains the highest known cultural site density in the country. And at Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado, she joined another ALCC team to learn how the park has been connecting Indian Youth Service Corps members with their ancestral lands through their work in different aspects of preservation and interpretation. Interior, the California Resource Agency, and other stakeholders this week broke ground on the latest phase of the Salton Sea Species Conservation Habitat Project, funded in part through the President's Investing in America agenda. The Bureau of Reclamation is investing $250 million through the Inflation Reduction Act over 5 years to fast-track implementation of the state's 10-year plan for dust suppression and aquatic restoration while enabling urgent water conservation. Interior this week announced significant strides in expanding geothermal energy on public lands, an abundant clean energy resource with tremendous potential to help the country meet the Biden-Harris administration's goal of a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035. Among the progress announced, the Bureau of Land Management approved the Fervo Cape Geothermal Power Project in Beaver County, Utah, which will use innovative technology to generate up to 2 gigawatts, enough to power 2 million homes. Interior this week signed 3 landmark agreements with Alaska Native tribes and corporations to advance co-stewardship and safeguard salmon within the Yukon, Kuskokwim, and Norton Sound regions through the department's Gravel to Gravel Keystone Initiative. The move also improves management of easements that provide access to public lands and waters across privately owned OTNA lands. Interior and the Department of Agriculture this week announced a final rule to strengthen Alaska tribal representation on the Federal Subsistence Board, or FSB, which manages subsistence use on federal lands and waters in Alaska. The final changes to the FSB reflect the meaningful role of tribal consultation and the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to engaging directly with tribal leaders when making decisions that impact their communities. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service this week awarded more than $6.4 million to